Hey, my name's James Nicholson. Welcome to my channel. Now, in this video, I've got the question that you want the answer to. How much are UK property prices going to crash in 2023 or 2024? Now, stick around to the end because I'm going to give you the answer and it might surprise you. Now, this channel is growing really, really fast, and I want to ask you a favour. We've got 3,000 subscribers now. We're on our way to 5,000, which is our next milestone. We're getting 50,000 views, and we're one of the fastest growing property channels in the UK. So can you help me get there even faster to that 5,000 by smashing that like button? That really helps with YouTube and will get us more views on our content. And hitting the subscribe button and the bell notification if you didn't already. That will get you all the new content. We're one of the only YouTubers that makes new content every single day. So let's talk about house prices. But first, I think we should look at the last two corrections that we've had in the UK property market. Now, the two that have been in my lifetime are in the 1990s. Properties crashed around 20%. The market was in absolute chaos. Now, that's a big correction. I actually can recall this because I was a young boy at the time. My grandfather had a house that was for sale and he sold it for significantly less. In fact, he would have easily taken that 20% drop. And that hit a lot of people. It took a long time to recover. A lot of people got very scared of investing. Now, back then, interest rates were very, very high. They weren't controlled by the Bank of England like they are now. They were actually controlled by the government. And so that sort of crash is something that happens not very often at all. But it did happen, and that was a big one. So let's look at the next crash, which a lot of you might actually recall this one because it was more recent, and this was around 2008. Now that crash, depending on the region as well, was around 20% as well. So different places were hit a lot harder. Now this crash was caused because of bad lending. Mortgage companies would lend to anybody that had a pulse, right? And that was including me. I've been investing since 1999, and so I remember going for meetings with my mortgage broker and they just said, tell me how much you earn. I was like, well, yeah, I'll get my pay slips out. They were like, no, just tell me how much you earn. It was mortgages were called self-certification. There was no real checks and balances in place. Anyone could pretty much get a mortgage. It was very, very easy. And if you were old enough, I'm 41 now, but if you might recall back then, all you'd get through your post, the junk mail, would be just credit card offers, balance transfers offers. And so people had a lot of credit card debt back then as well. It's not as reckless as it used to be back then. Now, what has also happened is the Bank of England have to do stress tests on the banks. And so 2008, the biggest problem wasn't that people weren't paying their mortgages initially. It was that banks were over leveraged. And then there was a run on some of the banks which could have worked out, like Northern Rock. My office is on Dorking High Street, right? And so if you go about 8 shops that way, there was a Northern Rock. And I remember for days, people just lining up, trying to get their personal savings out. It was absolutely insane what was going on then. And so that was more that the banks didn't do stress tests. Now, back then, you were able to get a mortgage of up to 130%, right? Up to 130%. Imagine that. That means that you could buy a 100 grand house and they'd lend you 130%, meaning you didn't need a deposit. So that made life a lot easier. And then you got your house, but you had another 30 grand just sitting in the bank. So what do people do with that? They bought cars, they bought holidays. They didn't invest it, most people, and they still had to pay back the £130,000. Now, when the market dropped 20%, you imagine that. This asset, you now are in negative equity. And that means that the bank is really in a bad situation there. And some people just gave the keys back. right? They just gave the keys back and said, I'm not interested in this. And the north of England, there are still some places now that haven't recovered fully since that. So you've got to invest in the right area. So we want to know about this potential difficulty and situation that we're going in. Now, analysts are looking at this. So what's driving the market now and causing us the biggest problem is inflation, right? So inflation is at 10%. And how you counter inflation is you raise interest rates. And by rising interest rates, it means people can't afford to spend so much. That pushes the country into a recession, which is kind of what they're trying to do. They've said, the Bank of England 2 weeks ago, that we're going to have the longest recession in history, which doesn't sound much fun to me. And so by raising the interest rates, that will cause the market to correct, right? And that's what they're expecting. Now, we normally, to curb 10% interest, we would put the interest rates higher than what inflation is at. And so we would put rates at 11%. Bank of England's already come out, and there were predictions that the base rate would hit 6.5%. They've already said it's not going to go that high. You see, this inflation is different to normal because most of it is driven by energy. And the futures for gas are down. So gas is going to be significantly cheaper in 2023. So that's a good thing, right? And that means that our energy prices will come down and hopefully we'll be in a much better situation. But it's still going to be very, very difficult. Unemployment is rising. So as I'm recording this, they have had an increase in unemployment, which means less people are going to be able to afford to pay their rent or their mortgage. So if it's rent, that's going to hit buy-to-let landlords. Higher interest rates hit buy-to-let landlords as well. Section 24, which is tax on landlords, is through the roof. That means it's really tough if you haven't got your properties in a limited company. There's tons of things going on that just aren't necessarily positive news. So what is the market saying? Well, Nationwide are saying that they think that the market is going to realistically correct to about 8% drop in house prices. Other places are saying that it could be as high as 20%, which would match the last two drops. Now, what have we got to steer us away from a 20% drop that we didn't have in 2008? Well, things that are different this time round are that people aren't as leveraged as they were in 2008. There is no 130% mortgages. There hasn't been for a long, long time. That's good news. And that means that not so many people, even if the market drops, would go into negative equity. You see, transactions are slowing down. The market's still at a peak at the moment. And so there are a lot of people that hopefully have got that buffer in equity of 10, 20, 30% because the market's been going up so much recently. Now, the people that have just bought the more recent transactions, which includes me, they're a little bit more like in the risk zone, I would say. And so that's important for them that they fix a rate and just see this out because prices will always recover. And that's the main thing here. Now, why is this potentially different? And I'm not saying the market isn't going to go down, to be very clear. I'm saying it's potentially different because we're not over leveraged. Also, why it's potentially we could have a softer landing here is because energy prices in the future are coming down. We can already see that, which is a good sign, right? And so that is going to knock this inflation down a bit, hopefully significantly, because that will make a big difference to how people feel about stuff. And the other thing that's really key here is that banks have new products which we didn't have in 2008 or the 90s. And some of those things, for example, are that you can get longer mortgages now. You can get 30-year mortgages, 40-year mortgages. And that means that can reduce your monthly payment and make it affordable, because that's all we really care about here is what is our monthly payment, right? All of us, all we care about is how much do we pay out each month? That's it. House prices are important, but that's a consideration. And one other thing that's happened, and we might get more in the budget this week, is that stamp duty got reduced recently, right? So the stamp duty being reduced meant that people can afford to borrow more. You see, on average, people with the stamp duty reduction, were able to get £10,000 savings in buying a house. Now, if you've got a 10% deposit, that means you can borrow an additional £100,000. So that could keep the market a little higher or stop it declining. It's affordability when you buy a house. When you go to buy clothes or something like that, maybe you go in there and you look for a deal, right? You look for the cheapest prices. Nearly everybody, when they buy a house, they look for what's the most I can spend. Nearly everybody gets the most they can spend for a house, right? And so that will keep the market potentially up. Now, what do I think? I think the market is going to have a correction. I think we're looking more around this sort of number, if I'm totally honest. I think 8% is a little optimistic. I think 20% is a little pessimistic here. I think we're going to have 10%. But we might look back on this video in 6 months and say, what a wally, I was totally wrong. So what would you do as a property investor? Well, every deal that you buy, you've got to make sure the numbers stack up when you go into a deal. You've got to buy below market value, buy from auctions, buy from people that aren't selling through estate agents. Get those deals, get the deal to stack up before you buy to protect yourself. Add value to a property to increase the equity that you've got in there. For example, I bought a property in Doncaster. It was a total mess. I refurbished it and created equity, 25% equity extra by doing that property up. That's what you've got to be looking at in today's market. I'd love to know your thoughts. I know this one's going to be interesting. We've got a few videos like this recently and they always get people going. Comment below. Let me know what you think. And we're also going to be running some live events soon. Come and see us. This is the opportunity of a lifetime, guys. When the market drops, you've got the opportunity to buy some incredible deals. So in the description is a link. Click on the link, fill in your details. Then you get details on all everything that's going on and how to get a ticket and come and see us live in London. If you didn't earlier, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell. Check out all the other content on my channel, including this video right here. Bye for now.